안녕하세요. SAUK 김 실장입니다. 자, 오늘은 좀 색다른 컨텐츠예요. 저희가 그동안 해왔던 컨텐츠들은 대부분 우리가 학교를 소개하고 뭐 프로그램을 소개하고 아니면은 뭐 국가를 소개하고 이런 컨텐츠를 좀 찍었었는데 오늘은 조금은 다릅니다. 자, 오늘은 내가 지금 영국 유학 혹은 네덜란드 유학 아니면은 해외 유학을 생각 중이고 IELTS를 공부하는 학생들을 위한 컨텐츠입니다. 오늘 뭐 주제에서도 나왔듯이 IELTS 시험관 저희랑 계속 함께 일해주시는 시험관 영국인 필립 선생님께서 오늘 컨텐츠를 좀 준비를 해주셨어요. 그래서 오늘 첫 번째 파트는요 7시부터 7시 50분까지 진행이 될 건데 요거는 시간은 조금은 유동적입니다. 조금은 빨리 끝날 수도 있고 늦게 끝날 수도 있는데요 1부 끝나고 2부에서는 스피킹과 라이팅 집중한 컨텐츠를 아마 그 시험 준비 방법을 소개해 드리려고 합니다. 사실 저희 필립 선생님은 현재 IELTS 시험관이기도 하지만 대학교에서도 학생을 가르치고 영국에 정말로 전 세계에서 가장 높은 수준의 교대에서 태솔 석사학위를 이제 받으신 선생님이시니까 한번 오늘 컨텐츠 우리 학생들 나는 IELTS 어느 정도 끝났다 이것도 괜찮고요. 나 IELTS 시작한 지가 얼마 안 됐다 이런 학생들한테도 도움이 될 거라고 생각합니다. 자, 그러면은 저는 여기까지 하고 지금부터 앞으로 3-40분간은 저희 영국인 우리 필립 선생님과 함께 하실 거고요. 혹시나 그 수업 들으시면서 궁금하신 거 있으시면은 채팅창에 꼭 좀 남겨주세요. 그러면 채팅창에 우리 학생분들께서 남겨주시면은 저희 선생님 혹은 제가 답변을 해드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 그러면은 떨리네요. 저희가 이런 컨텐츠는 오늘도 처음이라 우리 학생분들께서 얼마나 들어올지 그리고 얼마나 도움이 될지 한번 보고 뭐 이런 관련된 우리 영어 공부와 관련된 온라인 스트리밍을 뭐 꾸준히 하게 될지 아니면 뭐 다른 컨텐츠로 찾게 될지는 오늘 결과에 따라 달라질 것 같습니다. 자, 그러면은 시작하겠습니다.
So hello everyone and welcome to this live stream. So first of all I want to introduce myself so that you guys can get to know me a little bit better. So in this live stream, first of all I'm going to give some background about the IELTS and why it is important, and if any of you guys have any questions at any time, please write them in the chat, preferably in English if you can. So let's get started with the introduction. My full name is Philip David Chivers, but please just call me Philip. And I'm sure if you don't know by now, I come from England. So in the UK there are 4 countries. There's England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. My country is England, and in fact my hometown is called Bournemouth. Yeah, so a little bit about my background. I've got a master's degree in TESOL at University College London. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm also an active IELTS speaking examiner. So I've been working as an examiner for 6 years, only in the speaking part. So I know this part of the test really, really well. So if you do have any questions about the speaking part of the test, please write your questions in the chat box. And specifically, I work for IDP. So let's go on and have a look at the background of IELTS. So essentially there are two companies that run the IELTS test in Korea. These are IDP and the British Council, and these are two separate companies, but the IELTS test for both companies is exactly the same. There's absolutely no difference. IDP is from Australia, and it's owned by the Australian universities, and the British Council is from the UK. And both of these companies run and operate the IELTS test. So no, there isn't any difference between the IELTS test from IDP and the British Council in Korea. Although they do have different locations where you can take the test, but the test itself has no difference whatsoever. The price is the same. The administration of the test is also exactly the same. About the IELTS test. So why would you want to take the IELTS test? You take the IELTS test because it gives you a lot more options for the future. So IELTS is accepted in more than 11,000 organizations in over 140 countries. So it's got a very global reach, right? So 11,000 organizations means companies and education institutions. So this includes universities, schools, training colleges and tertiary institutions, which I guess you're more interested in taking IELTS so that it gives you a gateway into universities. But it's also worth noting that IELTS is also accepted in government departments and agencies. In fact, if you want to immigrate to the UK, you need to take the IELTS test. Also for professional and industry bodies. So for example, I know in Korea, the nuclear power plants, for example, require their employees to take the IELTS test, and also companies and employers. So there are different types of tests. I'm assuming that you're interested in taking IELTS for academic purpose, to go to the UK and study at a university. So the academic type of test is for candidates wishing to study at undergraduate or even postgraduate levels. But there is also general training, and general training is more inclined for businesses and companies for training purposes. So you might be wondering what it's like to take an IELTS test. It lasts all day long. It's a very kind of grueling test. It tests 4 different skills in language. So on the day of the test, usually they're very early. Usually the test starts at 8 a.m. in the morning, and it goes through the order. So first you arrive and you take the listening part of the test. So the listening part has 4 parts, and there's 40 questions, and each part lasts approximately 30 minutes. So we start with the listening, and then we go on into the reading part. So the reading part usually has 3 sections and 40 questions, and usually lasts 60 minutes. And then what I'm more interested in, and I think that a lot of students in Korea have most difficulty in, are the writing and speaking parts. So the writing, you have 2 tasks. So the first task lasts for about 20 minutes and the second task lasts for about 40 minutes. The first task, you're given a diagram or a kind of graphic, and you're required to comment on the diagram or graphic. And in the second task, you're given a problem and you're asked to give a solution or maybe an opinion or an advantage, disadvantage about some type of situation. So in the second half of this live stream, I'm going to go over in more detail, giving you some very useful tips in how to get a good writing score. And finally, we finish with the speaking. The speaking is the shortest part of the test. But Arguably, it's the most challenging and the most difficult. The speaking lasts for a maximum of 14 minutes. Usually the examiners try to extend it to the very maximum of 14 minutes so that the examiner can get as much language data and gradable data as possible. So the total time of the test is 2 hours and 44 minutes, but you do get breaks in between, like you do need a lunch break, like a refreshment break. One thing that's very important is to bring the passport that you signed up with the test with. So I say that if you've renewed your passport and you go to the test day with the new version of your passport, they're not going to accept it. They will only accept the passport that you signed up to with the test. And don't forget it, if you don't have your passport, then you can't take the test. Okay, so it's happened quite a few times actually. So I think on the day of the test, maybe you're very nervous and you're more focused on all of the parts that you need to do. And sometimes you might even forget your ID, but that's very important. Without your ID, you cannot take the test. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I'm an examiner with IDP, and I believe if you go to the IDP website, you'll be able to see all of the information. Oops. So let's try to get the website up. Okay, here we are. So yeah, this is the IDP website, and on this website you can see all the information. It goes through what you need to do to prepare. Okay, it doesn't hide any information. Which test do I need to take? As I mentioned before, there's the academic, there's the general training, and also if you want to move to the UK, you need the UKVI. Who accepts IELTS? It's got a long list of universities that accept IELTS. It's quite interesting to read about these success stories as well. And then it goes through what you expect on the test day, and it gives some very useful tips about what you need to do on the test day or what you can expect. Okay, so there are different types of IELTS tests. There's the computer-delivered test and there's the paper test. And they differ slightly in price, how much you need to pay. And also the administration of the test is slightly different. But essentially, the main aim is to get gradable language. Okay, so what do I need to bring on my speaking test? You can actually bring a pencil if you're familiar using your own pencil. Then please bring your own pencil. The IELTS staff won't ask you to use any special pencil. So you might want to use your own pencil that you're comfortable writing with. If you take the computer-delivered test, for example, with the reading part, you are allowed to make notes. There's a function for you to make notes and highlight, and I would really encourage you to do this. With the paper, I would recommend, and they also encourage you as well to write notes on the paper so that it helps you and reminds you where certain parts of the text are. So the IDP website gives you very useful information so you can get a general idea about the test and what to expect on the test day. So what do I need to bring? Make sure, as I said, you bring your ID, which will be your passport. And if you renew your passport, make sure you bring the original passport. Very important. I've seen it so many times that candidates forget their passport or they bring their updated version of the passport. In both cases, the test was cancelled. Do I have to write in pencil for the IELTS paper test? The answer to this is yes. The reason for this is because when you write your answer, the scanning machine can detect the answer much more better than, say, a pen. This is very interesting. If I take the IELTS on paper, can I write notes in the question booklets? So it's actually encouraged that you should do this, write notes. And when you practice for the IELTS test, you should be practicing writing notes, underlining, making maybe stars, circles, squiggly lines, anything that can help you remember where certain parts of the text are. Or even in the listening as well, you're allowed to write on the actual booklet. Okay, but with the listening, it's a little bit difficult to write on the booklet because you only get to listen one time, and writing and listening at the same time is not an easy skill to master. So yeah, with the listening, I would recommend listening and then writing down the answer, and also maybe predicting the answers as well. So how to prepare? Some very useful information that this website has in preparing, let's say for the speaking. We can have a look. So it goes through the different tasks in the speaking. I'm going to be going in detail about the different parts of the speaking test after the break. Okay, so can I do all the parts of the test on the same day? So yes, you can. And generally the test is in chronological order with the listening, reading, writing and speaking. Can I make the examiner laugh in my speaking test and get a higher mark? Okay, so some questions like this, you know, you might be interested in. I've laughed many times what the candidates do, and often laughter helps you feel more relaxed, okay, but it's not going to change your grade. However, if you're more relaxed, then you'll become more fluent and you can use better range of vocabulary. So it might help you actually get a better mark, but the actual action of laughing is not going to help you get a better grade. Okay, smiling, yeah, make you feel relaxed, and that's part of what they encourage you to do. Smile and feel relaxed. Like when you're nervous, it's going to affect your fluency and coherence. What happens in the speaking test? Okay, all of these are very useful for you to go through. So the speaking test is a discussion with a highly qualified IELTS examiner who's going to assess your ability to talk about a range of topics. So some of these topics are going to be very familiar to you, like maybe the weather, the clothes you wear, the friends you have, meeting places. All of these topics are very familiar, so you should have good vocabulary to talk about these topics, but some of the topics are not very familiar. And that's where your language shines through and you're able to cope with the question. Right, so the speaking test has 3 parts. It's all recorded. So a description of the 3 parts of the interview is found in the information for the candidate's booklet. So the accents, right? So I'm from England and I've got I guess a typical British accent, but in the listening test, they use a range of accents. What do I need to bring to my speaking test? So this is very important. As I said before, bring the same passport as you use to make the reservation for your IELTS test. Do I have to speak with a particular accent? No, you don't. Okay, everyone has a different accent. In fact, there's no such thing as a standard English accent because English is so widely spoken throughout the world. There's no such thing as a standard accent. Okay, so that's the speaking test. So my biggest advice to you is just to relax. Don't be nervous, and also get into the kind of mood of communicating in English. So I would encourage you to go through the IELTS website, the IDP IELTS website. It's got some very useful information, and also it's got some links where you can prepare for the IELTS test as well. It's got the band scores to understand your level, how the IELTS is marked and graded. If you're kind of wondering why you got a certain grade, you can request a remark. The test results, and if you want to have a remark, this goes through the procedure of reissuing. Okay, so this is all about the IELTS test from the IDP. It's a very good website to use. It's also got some very useful videos for you to watch and for you to understand the IELTS test a bit further. Okay, so let's go back now to the presentation. So in the IELTS test, you also need to do the listening. And I guess the only way to prepare for this is by practicing. So all the skills you can only practice. With the listening, there is a really good book, the Cambridge book, that has 4 listening samples. And I really recommend this book, the Cambridge. At the moment, I think it's Cambridge 17. And there's 4 sample tests in this book. And they're so useful for you to practice the listening part. So you get familiar with the layout of the listening. You can practice and you can listen for all the different accents and the different type of questions as well. For me, always the listening, they're trying to trick you, and they use different language, they use different grammar forms to try and trick you. So the best way to practice for the listening is by actually going through a test, and it comes with a book and audio file. And also, once you've listened, you can re-listen as well. Not like the actual live test, you only get to listen one time. You can't go back and listen again. So the listening, it consists of 4 parts, and each part having 10 questions. The first part is a conversation between 2 speakers. The second part is a monologue, which means one person speaking. The third part is a conversation between up to 4 people, so it's a group conversation. And again, the fourth part is a monologue. So with the listening, they're going to test you on a variety of different type of questions. So they want to get, the IELTS wants to get a good range of your ability and range of your skill, so they can assess fairly accurately your level. So these types of questions, they include multiple choice, matching. You're given a plan, a map, and you need to locate certain areas of the map. So this is a very common question in the listening part. So you're given a map, and the speaker is giving instructions about how to go to a certain place on the map. And the way they speak is that they give like prepositions of location and also markers where certain things are in the map. Again, this is all given in the Cambridge book. And form note completion, you need to write some notes, sentence completion, and short answers. I think another good piece of advice is to read the instruction very carefully. Often under the pressure of a test, we forget to read the instruction, or even we read the instruction and we kind of assume what the answer needs to be. In the listening part, especially with the IELTS, it often asks for one word. Right, and immediately if you write 2 words, even if one word is correct, the answer would be wrong. Okay, so read the instruction very, very carefully. Maybe the instruction is asking you to write a number or a word, right? So it's very important that you read the instruction carefully and don't rush, right? And another piece of advice would be to kind of predict what the answers are going to be. In the listening part, you get about 30 seconds before the speaker starts speaking, and you can read the information, and there's blanks. And it's done in chunks, like you get 10 questions, but the speaker will give a speech, and you're going to answer the first 5 questions, so from 1 to 5. And it's a good technique to kind of predict what the speaker is going to say. what do you expect the answer to be? And I find this, this tip is particularly useful because it increases your chances of actually answering the question, and it gets your mind working. You kind of imagine what the situation is going to be like, right? So you get to see the kind of script with the missing gaps, kind of predict what the speaker is going to say in the missing gaps. Okay, so that's the listening part. Some listening tips. Always read the instructions, very important, all right? Don't rush, don't panic. Read the instructions very calmly, and the IELTS test is set up for you not to panic. They always give you time. Usually it's 30 seconds before the speaker starts, so it gives you some time to go through the speech or the script. Kind of predict the answers before listening, and remember, you only get to hear the recording once, right? So predicting the answers is a very good way of getting into the kind of rhythm of the test. Also make notes on the question booklets, like in the speaking with the 30 seconds, maybe write down some words that you think the speaker might say. And also practice, always practice. Understand the format and become familiar with the format. So IELTS is a very particular test, especially with the listening. Very different from the TOEIC test. So being familiar with the format will help you be more calm, okay? And that's going to increase your chances of getting a higher score. So then you move on to the reading, okay? The reading consists of 3 sections with 40 questions, which are taken from anything from like journals, books, magazines, and newspapers. So for me, the reading part is the most challenging because I'm a slow reader, but in the IELTS test, you have to be a fast reader. And maybe some of you have taken the Sunung or are familiar with the Sunung. So the Sunung is a perfect example of skimming, right? So skimming gives you the skill of reading quickly and looking for particular information. So the way I think the way I approach the reading part and the way you would approach the reading part would be different, fundamentally different. So my advice for you would be to read the answers, read the questions first, and then go through the reading. So then you're looking for specific information. But for me, because I can understand everything, and I'm a slow reader for native terms, but I can actually have the ability to speed read. So for me, I read first and I kind of remember key words and key parts of the script and where they're located. So I found with the reading, it's often with about 7 to 8 paragraphs. And that's very, very challenging, especially when it's timed. So the types of questions the IELTS test asks, first of all, multiple choice. For me, this is the hardest part. The hardest question in the multiple choice is the answer is not given, right? Which basically means the text doesn't include the part of the question that's being tested, right? The information in the question is not given in the text. For me, that's the hardest part because I have self-doubt, right? I'm like, am I reading right? Is it in here? Do I know what the text is talking about or discussing? So for me, that's the hardest part because it can actually be the answer not given in the text. You might identify information, true, false, not given. I hate the not given part because it should either be true or false. Not given is trying to trick you. So for this part, I need to reread the actual paragraph where the question is asking me to go to. Matching information, matching headings. I find this very challenging as well. Features, sentence endings. Maybe you're asked to identify a particular sentence, maybe a summary of a paragraph, maybe a note. They can also include table a flowchart or completing a flowchart. You might be asked to identify a diagram, label, or complete the label as well. And the last part is short answer questions, so it can be anything. So again, the best way to prepare for the reading is by practicing. And practice under timed conditions. Okay, because time in the reading is going to be your worst enemy. Okay, so practice timing and speed read as well. That's a very good skill to build up. Again, read the instructions carefully. And the reading part, because it's timed, you want to read the instructions quickly, but you might miss something. That's the only piece of information you should read slowly and carefully, is the instructions. Also, make notes. This is what I find the most useful part, making notes. Identify parts of the paragraph you think is going to be in the question. Make notes about that. I usually underline, I make stars, I make circles, squiggly lines that help you remember where parts of the paragraph are important. And practice your skimming reading skills, right? And imagine what is being discussed in the reading. So these can be anything. I mean, I've read about ants and ant colonies, so I'm imagining an ant hill and ants, the behavior of ants. Another reading I read was about the ancient Egyptians and about the kings of the ancient Egyptians. So I'm imagining the pyramids, the pharaohs, and things like that. So being able to picture what you're reading is actually a pretty good skill. So it helps you identify different parts of the text quicker than if you was to just memorize the certain words. And skimming is a very good skill, and I'm sure if you're familiar with the Sunung in Korea, these students have very, very, very good skimming skills, possibly better even than me. Remember where predictable key information is located, right? This is going to really help you with the timing part. So as I'm reading the text, I'm kind of memorizing where key information is. There's a lot of key information, and there's a lot of information that I think is not necessary to remember. Right? So if you remember key information, it's going to help you answer the questions more accurately. And practice sample tests under timed conditions. Right? Very important, again, that you practice the timing. So you get familiar with how long 20 minutes is, right? So everyone has a different understanding upon 20 minutes. So if you can accurately predict how long 20 minutes is, how long you got to read and then answer the questions, right, you're more likely to get a better score. And then we go on to the writing part. So the writing part consists of 2 tasks. And task 1 asks you to summarize and comment on a graphic in at least 150 words. So I believe if it's anything less than 150 words, it's not accepted. Or you will get a very low score. So you've got about 20 minutes to complete this task. So the word about is very important because you can finish this in about 15 minutes and have 5 minutes extra to work on task 2. So with task 1, I would recommend that you get very, very good at answering task 1 quickly. So task 1, you can structure. It's got a very similar structure. Every different type of question has a certain structure. So if you become very good at answering task 1, that will save you time to answer task 2, which is a lot more difficult than task 1. So again, you've got about 40 minutes. If you take longer than 20 minutes on task 1, in my experience, you're going to struggle with task 2, right? So this is where timing is so important. You need to kind of feel how long 20 minutes is, and that's a very good skill to have. So task 2 asks you to use language to answer a high-level question. I'm going to give you some samples of these questions in the second part of this stream. And you need to write at least 250 words. Okay, and it's worth 2 times more than task 1. So task 2 basically is 2 times more important than task 1. So some writing tips. Again, read the instructions. Understand the question is very important because the question can form part of your answer. Practice timed writing. Again, with all of the tests other than speaking, timing is very important. So practice timed writing for task 2 and for task 1. Understand what 150 to 200 and 250 and 300 words feels like, right? So if you're first starting preparing for the IELTS test, you might not know what 150 words feels like, right? Because you don't have time to count. So keep practicing over and over and over again, and then you can become fairly accurate, right? You get to understand the kind of feeling, how it feels to write between 150 to 200 words. Again, with task 2, it's even more, right? You kind of get the feeling how 250 to 300 words kind of feels like, right? So that's also a very useful skill in the writing test. And also practice structured writing and practice using expressions, okay? And that's what I like to teach as well. I'm also an IELTS teacher. So I also like to teach using the expressions, which will get you a higher grade, and also the structure, which will also improve your score. And then finally, we come to the speaking. So this is what I'm an examiner in, the speaking part. So the speaking consists of 3 parts. So imagine that you go into the speaking room, and the examiner's there waiting at the door. And when the examiner's waiting at the door, he or she has a recording device, and it's already on. So the test is being recorded even before you enter the room. Okay, so the examiner welcomes you into the room and offers you the seat. And the examiner mentions that the test is being recorded, and then the examiner reads out some information related to the test. And then the examiner identifies you and checks your passport to make sure you're the right person in the room. And then the test starts. So part 1 is kind of a warm-up. It gets you, like if you've got nerves, it kind of makes you feel more relaxed. Talks about very, very familiar questions. And so part 1 is divided into 2 sections. Part 2 is a 2-minute monologue speech. So you're given a question and you're asked to talk about it for 2 minutes continually. And part 3 is related to part 2, the topic. It's loosely based around that topic. And it's more of a discussion, more of a 2-way discussion between yourself and the examiner. So some speaking tips. First of all, justify your answers, right? Never give a single word or a single sentence answer. Justify, right? Use because and justify your answer. And also listen to English speaking podcasts. So there's hundreds and thousands of English speaking podcasts. And these will really help you to understand what the speaking test is all about. And also on YouTube, look at videos of speaking tests. And so you get into that kind of understanding. Yeah, this is what the speaking test is about. And this, nothing's going to be a surprise. And also continue speaking, right? Let the examiner direct you from parts 1, 2, and 3, especially with part 2. So part 2 is testing, actually, basically all it is testing your ability to continue speaking about a particular topic. So your ability to continue speaking, right? Just continue. And then at the end, the examiner's going to say, thank you, all right? The time's up. Also be spontaneous, right? You can practice all you like, but often you don't know what the questions are going to be. And often the ideas just come to mind, and be spontaneous, right? If you think of an idea, develop it as well. Say what's in your mind and like develop your ideas, and you can practice developing your ideas. And use expressions to introduce your ideas and to link your ideas together, right? Kind of get on the train of thought and link your ideas together. So again, the only way to practice for the speaking part of the IELTS test is by actually speaking yourself. And without speaking, you're not going to improve your score. So you can research about how to approach the speaking test. You can study the kind of expressions to introduce ideas and link ideas together. You can study about the vocabulary about different topics. You can study all this all you want, but unless you actually practice speaking, you're not going to improve. Okay, so the key word here is throughout all the tests is practice. Okay, and with the speaking, it's not easy to practice. You can practice in front of a mirror. You can record yourself, which is a very useful tip as well. In every test, you can record yourself and play back and listen to what you've been talking about. Okay, so yeah, be spontaneous. If you think of an idea, right, say it and continue. Develop your ideas as well. And try not to be nervous, because if you're nervous, you tend to either speak too fast or too slow, and that's going to affect your score as well. Okay, so before the test, try not to speak Korean or any other language. Try to speak in English, right? If you've got a friend, try to speak in English all the while, and so it gets you in that kind of comfort zone, right? You're comfortable speaking English. Okay, so that's about the speaking tips. And then you're given your IELTS score. Okay, so I guess a lot of you want between level 5 to level 7, right? This is kind of the golden area of the score, between a modest user and a good user. So I know with the speaking test, your score is based upon four criteria, which is the fluency and coherence, the lexical resource, the grammar, and the pronunciation. So with these 4 scores, you're given like up to 9, and you're given the average of these 4 criteria. Okay, so there are tips and there are ways to improve your score from going from level 5 to level 6, or level 5 to 5.5 in a level 6. There are ways and tips and practices that you can do that you can increase your score. So fundamentally, like if, for example, you take the speaking test, I can give you tips in order to go from level 5 to a level 6. But essentially, the speaking is up to you. You can go through and practice the different parts, and you can understand where you need to improve, the areas you need to improve, and it is absolutely possible for you to improve from a level 5 to a level 7. And I've seen it done. I've helped people go from for example, maybe a level 4 up to a level 7, right? It is possible. So it's up to you how much you practice and how much you invest in this. But the key word again is practice. Okay, but practice well as well. There's bad practice and there's good practice. So make sure you go on the side of good practice. Okay, so from 8 p.m, I'm going to go into some more detail about tips and what the writing part is, and I'm going to show you some examples about the writing questions and how to approach the writing part, and also the speaking part as well. So I'm going to go into some more detail about how to improve your speaking score, and that is absolutely possible. So before we go for the break, do you guys have any questions? Those who are here, do you have any questions you can write in the chat box? Okay, so I guess that you guys are just happy to be here, and I hope that you can understand me okay, and if you've got anything to say at all, you can write it in the chat box. And so please return at 8 p.m, and I'm going to go over in more detail about the writing and the speaking parts of the IELTS test and how to improve your score. Okay, so please join me back at 8 o'clock. I look forward to giving you guys some very useful tips in the writing and speaking. Okay, I look forward to seeing you soon.